right, all right, all right. We say shalom, shalom. Welcome to our Torah study on tonight. The chauffeur throughout the day. So it's just a part of our keeping the Torah and staying in Torah. Um, and first and foremost, I just want to. I've announced it to some and those who may not have heard the sad news I received on today in the loss of my brother, my elder brother, Alan Arthur Hazlett, passed away, and we certainly will miss him. It's painful in the heart, and your spirit, you kind of grieve the loss of a loved one, whether it's a sibling or a child or a parent. When you're that close in the family, it's sad, it's sorrowful, a lot of grieving. But he will be missed, and just never something that you rejoice over. You know, your parents can live 90, 100 years, and when you lose them, it's sad. It's just painful, and you grieve because that's a part of our makeup in the human family. We're made with a lot of emotions, and we get those emotions from our Abba in heaven. He made us, and it says we were made in His image and in His likeness. And so he even, when He made us, He even gave us a choice, and we can choose. We can choose our way of life. We can choose whether we're going to follow Him, if we're going to keep His commandments, we're going to be obedient unto Him, or if we're not. That's just a choice that we can make. He leaves it up to us. And there's a place for those who make the wrong decisions and the wrong choices. And there's a place for those who make the right choices and the right decisions. And so from the very beginning, He created everything. And so we're dealing with certain emotions. And, so we do solicit your prayers, and we're thankful for your prayers. There's a day coming. There's a day coming where, as we get close to the feast of Shavuot, there's a day coming that if you want to be in His kingdom, so if you want to be in His kingdom, if you're going to survive the 1,000 years of peace and then His everlasting kingdom, you're going to have to be obedient unto Him. You're going to have to follow His statutes and His commandments. And He puts it out in front of us. He tells us He's very open. He doesn't tell us anything in His word that, there's things that are hidden and concealed, but when it comes to what He expects of us, it's written. It's there, what He expects of us. And in Matthew chapter 7, in verse number 24, I believe it is, Matthew 7 and 24, and He says, and this is what we have to really look for, or verse number 26 maybe. I'm sorry, verse 21. Let's go up. There it is, verse 23 here. And then will I profess unto them, I never knew you, depart from me. Why do they have to depart from Him? They work iniquity. And if this is what you hear, depart from me, ye that work iniquity, I would if I know this is a future event, it's something that's going to happen. Many of us will be alive when he returns, but some of us will go through the way of the grave and have to be brought back, because there's a day where we all have to stand before our Messiah. But if I knew these are some of the things that he's going to say, some of the things he'll say is, well done, thou good and what? Faithful servant. So you have that faithfulness side of it where you're going to have to be faithful. You're going to have to be obedient. A part of that faith is just waiting and enduring, believing this, and then waiting on it, believing it and waiting on it. That's what it says in Habakkuk, the 2nd chapter. He says that what does it say? Write the vision, make it plain. And then he goes on to say you have to wait for it, and the just shall live by faith. So a part of my faith and being faithful is waiting and enduring. But this I know is going to happen. So there's a day coming where if I'm not in my Abba's will, but he that doeth the will of my Abba, which is in heaven, if I'm not in my Abba's will, then he's going to say, depart from me, I never knew. It is highly critical for every believer to understand what this working iniquity is, because this is what's going to get you cut off. And there's going to be a lot of good people that worked iniquity. So let's pull down this iniquity here. Let's pull down that word in Matthew 7:23. Iniquity is G458. And when we look that up, that's anomia. Anomia. Anomia means illegality. That is violation of law. Violation of law, wickedness. That is iniquity. So when he says you worked iniquity, that means they were disobedient or they violated his law. Now, when it says violation of law here, it's not talking about the Iowa Code. It's not talking about the United States Code. It's not talking about that. He gave us what he expected us to do. He gave it unto us. So violation of that is anomia in the Greek, or in English, iniquity. So anomia, iniquity, violation of law is not Abba's will. It's not his will that you break Torah. Anybody that says you can't keep Torah, we're not under Torah, we can't, that's not his will. It's not his will. Yasharal made a covenant with him. And the reason why our Messiah came, Yahushua Mashiach, who the world calls Jesus Christ, the reason why he came was to get us back into covenant. You can't get back into covenant if you're against the covenant. It doesn't, you can't have that reasoning. I'm against the covenant, so I'm doing the Abba's will. I'm doing Abba's will by breaking his covenant. It's not going to work that way. And it's a sad thing that a lot of people are being led down that path. But who told us that a lot of people will be led down that path? Who told us that? Yahushua Mashiach in this same chapter. Because how do we know he said that in this same chapter? Let's go back. Yeah, let's go up to verse 13. Let's go up to verse 13. Enter ye in where? For wide is the gate and broad is the way that leadeth to destruction. And how many go there at? Many. So the broad way and the wide way, the way that everybody's going. If If everybody in the world, well, look at us. We've got all these people. Usually that's a good indication that you're in a broad way. That's a pretty good indication in a broad way. You got 2.4 billion Christians. You've got 2 point some billion Muslims. You've got, Hinduism, or maybe it might be 2 point some billion because you got India and China there. Might be the other 2 point. When you look at Hinduism, Christianity, and Muslim or Islam, when you look at all of those, and count up all of those people that's in that is a wide gate and a broad way. Because what did Yahushua say? Because straight is the gate and narrow is the way which leadeth where? Unto life. But how many get it? Only a few there be that what? Find it. If you find it, that means you was what? I was looking for it. I'm looking for this straight gate and this narrow way. I'm looking for this narrow way. And that's why when Yahushua said in Matthew or John 14:6, he says, I am the way. That way is called Derek. It's Derek. How we say the word Derek, but it's in Hebrew, it's way. So he is the way. You have to search for this way. Narrow is the way that leadeth unto life. There be few that find it. So you have to search for what is that straight path? What is that narrow way? And that's what I have to be in pursuit of and try to find that narrow way, because if I find it, I know I'll be in Abba's will. I'll be in Abba's will. I can't go. We have one life to live. What is that called? YOLO? You only live once. That's what they call YOLO. You only live once. YOLO. We have one shot at this. One shot. Because when you take your last breath, your accounting is done. Your book is sealed. When you take that last breath, your book is closed, it's sealed until the end, until he opens up that book again. And when he opens up your book, he's going to see what you did your life. From your whole life, he's going to see what you did. So I've got to find that straight path. I have to know, and everybody has to know. You have to know that you know that you know. You got to know it. Well done. But like my former pastor would say, he's not going to say well done if you didn't do well. He ain't going to say that. He's not going to tell you well done if you broke all his commandments. Why would he say well done and you go against his commandments? You go against his Torah. Oh, you did well. You broke you didn't even believe in my commandments. You weren't even under a covenant with me, and you worked iniquity, but you done well. That's a lie. That's deception. That's deception. Because if you haven't done well and you haven't found that narrow way which leads unto life, you're not going to get it. You're not going to get it. So at the time of Shavuot, when he poured out on the first Shavuot, and I know there's, counting the Omer leading up to the 49th, which is 7 Shabbats, and counting the Omer and we start counting the Omer from the Feast of First Fruits, when they actually, well, let's see, I think it's in Deuteronomy 16. Is it Deuteronomy 16? And let's look at verse, is it 10? Deuteronomy 16:10. Let's look at that. Let's look at that first. Deuteronomy 16:10.
And thou shalt keep the feast of weeks unto Yahuwah thy Elohim with the tribute of a freewill offering of thine hand, which thou shalt give unto Yahuwah thy Elohim, according as Yahuwah thy Elohim have blessed thee. And thou shalt rejoice, before Yahuwah thy Elohim. There's another verse, because it says from the time that you put the sickle to the corn. Is that in verse number 9? Is that? Let's go up. Yeah, verse number 9. Here it is. 7 weeks shalt thou number unto thee. Begin to number the 7 weeks from such a time as thou beginnest to put the sickle to the corn. When you put the sickle to the corn, that's when you was going into harvest. You were going in to get the harvest. And at the time of Pesach and unleavened bread, they had the feast of first fruits. So after unleavened bread, they would go and get the harvest that they had. Because you have, and anybody that is gardening knows that you have more than one harvest. And according to their climate and everything, I mean, we have winters around here, but according to their climate, they would have a harvest at the beginning of the year because their climate is different from ours. So what would they pray for at the beginning of the year? Because it's in prophecy, they would pray for it, and they would get the early rain. Have you ever heard of the early rain? The early rain was at the beginning of the year because they were going to have a harvest. They knew they was going to have a harvest, and you was going to have the sickle hitting the corn, or the harvest. And they didn't have corn. Actually, it's wheat. It's wheat. But they would pray for the early rain so that they could have a harvest. The latter rain, when do you think the latter rain came? They had the early rain to get this harvest. The latter rain was when? It was towards the end of the middle of the year, or which harvest was that? Around the 7th month? What are we doing about the 7th month? Tabernacle. So they had to have a harvest at Tabernacle. They had a harvest at the beginning of the year, and they had a harvest at the end of the year. That's why he said, when you come to this feast, as we get down, we'll read down here, nobody's supposed to show up empty. He said, oh, no, you don't come to my feast empty. Oh, no. You had a harvest, you're supposed to bring that offering. Now, he calls it a free will offering. It's a free will offering of thine hand. But this is where they would get the free will offering. From the time that they went to harvest, thou shalt keep the feast of weeks unto Yahuwah thy Elohim with the tribute of a freewill offering of thine hand, which thou shalt give unto Yahuwah thy Elohim, according as Yahuwah thy Elohim have blessed thee. And thou shalt rejoice before Yahuwah thy Elohim, thou and thy son, thy daughter. So we're teaching our children. We teach our children. We teach our children about, now, most of us aren't agriculturalists. We're not gardeners and everything, and I'm trying my hand at it again this year. But you're supposed to teach your children how to plant. Now, if we don't get the rain that we need, what do? We make sure our garden is what? Water. We'll go with the house, we'll get some water, we'll get the hose or what. Man, we ain't gonna get a lot of rain this summer, but we're gonna be out there watering our because back in the day, they would try to get ways to irrigate, to get water in there. But they would pray to the Most High that when it came time for the harvest, or when it came time the planting of the seed, and we want to have a harvest, we're praying for the early rain. Early rain was at the beginning of the year. Latter rain was at the end of the year when they had the year of the end harvest. Now, we use that in prophecy, and a lot of people look at it in prophecy as the day of Shavuot that we're coming up on. You had the early rain because you had the revival and the outpouring of the Ruach HaKodesh. And so they're saying the latter rain, some people say the latter rain started in 1906 at Azusa Street. That was the latter rain. Some people say we're still waiting on the latter rain. We're waiting on a big revival. But they get all of this early rain and latter rain if you understand the seasons and the planting and the feasts. So they would pray for early rain at this time of the year, because for us, we got the month of May getting ready to go into the month of June. But to us, this is actually like the third year. of the new year. To us, on the Hebrew calendar, our first harvest and our early rain is at the beginning of the year because we want to have an offering at the feast time. So you count from the time that you have your first fruits, when it says the sickle hits the corn, or actually it's wheat and stuff, that's the first fruits. And then from there you count 7 Sabbaths. You count the Omer, 7 Sabbaths. And then after that you have Shavuot. So that's what we're coming up on, is Shavuot. And he says, thou shalt rejoice. This is the Feast of Weeks. Thou and thy son, thy daughter. Any questions on that? Any questions on that? I mean, when you understand the feast and the harvest that they had, it kind of gives you an understanding when they say the early rain and the latter rain. Because we associate early rain and latter rain in prophecy, we associate it differently than what is actually in the book. So, but once you understand it in the book, then you know, okay, well, what they was talking about, the early rain, was so that they could have an offering to be able to give unto the Most High Yah. It was illegal to come to him without an offering. That was illegal. Well, I ain't got no harvest. You didn't send no rain. I don't have no harvest. I have nothing to give. So they want the early rain, and then at the 7th month, they wanted the latter rain because they had because we'll see here. And thou shalt remember that thou was a bondman in Egypt, and thou shalt observe and do these statutes. Thou shalt observe the Feast of Tabernacles 7 days. After that, thou hast gathered in thy corn and thy wine. So this is another harvest. See, this one is in the 7th month. See that? Feast of Tabernacles? This is in the 7th month. So this would be the latter rain. So if you really want to look at the early rain and the latter rain, the early rain will be around the Feast of Unleavened Bread. The latter rain will be around the Feast of Tabernacles. That would be the early and the latter rain. And thou shalt rejoice in thy feast, and thou and thy son and thy daughter again, and thy manservant and the maidservant and the Levite, the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow that are within thy gates. 7 days shalt thou keep a solemn feast unto Yahuwah thy Elohim in the place which Yahuwah shall choose, because Yahuwah thy Elohim shall bless thee in all thy increase. Yahuwah thy Elohim shall bless thee in all thy So what would be a curse to them then? If this is all a blessing, what would be a curse? Huh? Not to keep it, a curse, but what would be a curse? If you need it, I mean, what did you get to get the harvest? What we just been talking about. So what would be a curse? No rain. No rain would be a curse. That's why he says in Zechariah the 13th chapter, he says, if you don't keep this Feast of Tabernacles, and we're talking about in the kingdom to come, he says, I'm not going to give you no rain. Oh, it's right there. Somebody can look it up. It's right there. I think it's Zechariah 13, isn't it? Is it Zechariah 13 or Zechariah 14? Is it 14? One of the plagues was you ain't getting no rain. And if you ain't get no rain, you ain't get no harvest. No harvest means you ain't got nothing to eat. I think is it Zechariah 14? Where it talks about he ain't gonna give you no rain at the time of this feast? Is that what it is? What does it say? Sefer, that's good. Yasharah or Jerusalem.
Jerusalem.
Uh-huh.
To worship the King, Yahuwah, even upon them shall be no rain.
Yeah. So that was not to get any rain was to be cursed. It's to be cursed because at this time of year at harvest, when you know a harvest is coming, you want some rain. But there's going to be people that don't want to keep tabernacles. Well, it's already today. You got people today. Oh, we don't have to keep tabernacle. We don't have to keep those feasts. The only feast we keep is Pentecost. All the rest of them, we ain't got nothing to do with them. Yes. Yeah. And that plague that comes upon them is mentioned earlier in the chapter. And you know what that plague is? Because it's earlier in the chapter of 14. It says their flesh is going to melt in their eyes, in their mouth. Their flesh is just going to melt away on them. Sounds like some kind of thermonuclear attack. It says that right there in Zechariah 14. What the plague is on everybody who don't want to keep tabernacles. And that's in the new kingdom to come. Because you got people now saying you don't have to keep that. We ain't under no. You hear people who, Yahushua Mashiach, who the world calls Jesus Christ, was a Hebrew. He was a Hebrew. He was an Israelite of the tribe of Judah. He was sinless, which means he kept Torah. You can't understand what sinless is if you don't understand Torah. So he was sinless unto Torah. But you have people today say that they're following this Israelite who grew up in this culture that was in the eyes of the Most High Yah, sinless. They say that we're Christians, we're following him, but they break Torah. They don't make sense. They don't keep the Shabbat. They don't keep the feast days. They don't keep it. I heard somebody say, we don't have to keep, we're not under the 10 Commandments. You ain't under the 10 Commandments? Well, you can go out and kill somebody? You know, 10 Commandments is thou shalt not kill. Well, you just go out and kill somebody then? Yeah, I can go kill, you can go out and lie? Shaul said, I would not have known what lust was, except the law said what? Thou shalt not covet. He studied that. Now, y'all know he said at the feet of Gamaliel. He studied that. He was into halakha. He could teach the law. Not only what was written in Torah, but sitting at the feet of Gamaliel, he knew everything, all the traditions and everything that the Pharisees would keep. And so what Yahusha was doing away with all of those traditions that the Pharisees had. That's what he was doing. He wasn't doing away with Torah. He was doing away with that Talmud. You had the Talmud back in them days. The Babylonian Talmud was before Messiah. That's why they said, how come your disciples don't follow the traditions of the elders? They're not washing their hands 3 times before they eat. He says, through your traditions, you made the faith of my Abahim without effect. Because all you did was put traditions on people. He didn't destroy no law. He didn't take away no Torah. He did step on that Talmud, because he says, all those traditions you're doing, if you don't wash your hands, you can still eat. They wanted to condemn you because you didn't wash. Not only you didn't wash your hands, you didn't do it 3 times. And you had to switch basins. You had wash hands, didn't get no, pour that wash hands, didn't get that, pour wash hands. He says, through your traditions, you made the word of my Abba without effect. Get rid of those traditions. He came in from the field, he's hungry, let him eat. And that wasn't the only, they did a lot of different traditions. Even when it says, honor thy father and thy mother, they was breaking that commandment. Yahusha did not go against any commandments, and anybody that says that they're following him by breaking the commandments is nothing but a liar. And it's sad to say, because there's a lot of them out there. Remember now, it's straight and it's narrow. I think we had up there path, the pathway of Abba. It ain't no wide gate, Broadway, not the pathway of Abba. No, he says only a few find it. And that's why Yahusha says, I'm that way, follow me. You don't see me breaking no Torah. I didn't break no Torah, follow me. But you got people saying Torah's done away with. He said, it is finished. He had finished his life. He was perfect without sin. Can anybody say that? When you up there on the cross and you get ready to take your last breath and you say it is finished, can you say you're sinless? Yahusha could. He said, it's finished. I did it. I've kept the faith. Even Shaul says, now Shaul didn't know until he got to the end. Because if you read the 9th chapter of 1 Corinthians, he said, you know, I don't know, I might have ran all my life and lose out at the end. I mean, it's that last verse in 1 Corinthians chapter 9. He says something about, lest I be a castaway. After all that I've done, lest I be a castaway. He wasn't quite sure. After all that he's done, I might still be cast away. Now, Paul, they said he sat on the Sanhedrin, so he was a Pharisee of Pharisees. And he said, I might be cast away. It's a straight and narrow way. That's why Shaul was trying to tell y'all, y'all better put away all that works of the flesh now, because this is a straight and narrow way. You want to get to life? Yeah. But by the time Timothy wrote that, because Paul didn't do a lot of writing, but he told Timothy, he said, I've finished my course. I've kept the faith. Now is laid up for me a crown. It wasn't until he got to the end that he knew, okay, yeah, I've kept the faith. I've done it all. I did what I was supposed to do. I mean, a crown of righteousness is laid up for me now. Remember what Shaul said? I earnestly press where? Toward the mark of the high calling of Elohim. And you can only do that this way. That's the only way you can do it. Because Yahusha said, direct. Let me direct you. I'm the way. So if you breaking Torah, you ain't following him. You can't say you're following him and you're breaking Torah. He says, shall bless thee in all thy increase. He's going to increase you. And that's why he commands an offering. And in all the works of thy hands, therefore thou shalt surely what? Rejoice. He's going to bless not only their agriculturally, but he says all the works of your hands. Everybody wasn't an agriculturalist. Yahusha wasn't an agriculturalist. What was he? He was a carpenter. He was a carpenter, so he worked with his hands. And because I know some people say, I'll bring some greens, some kale, and that. He worked with his hands. He didn't bring no kale, no greens, but he did give an offering of the things that he worked with his hands. Because some people say all they see is the Levitical agriculture tithe. That ain't the only tithe. The Levitical agriculture tithe is not the only tithe. That's why he said tithes. I'm trying to get that out. Because agriculture tithing is not the only tithe. Because Abraham tithed and he was not an agriculturalist. He was nomadic. He was on the move. And he had a lot of cattle. Y'all know it said the Most High Yah increased him. So when he moved, he didn't move very fast. Because he had he had servants, he had cattle. Even when he went and fought the kings, I think he had 200 men that went to fight with him. Was it 200 or more than that? Yeah, of his servants in his house. Get the sword, brothers, we're going to war. Put down them plowshares and get the sword, we're going to war in his house. So he had a lot of servants. He increased Abraham, but Abraham was on the move. He was not an agriculturalist. In order to be an agriculturalist or a gardener, you have to stay there. You have to plant the seed. You got to get the weeds out. You're praying for harvest. You're dressing it. I mean, then you got harvest. You're working at. You can't be nomadic and be an agriculturalist. So everybody wasn't an agriculturalist, but they did something. Notice now, 3 times in a year shall all thy males appear before Yahuwah thy Elohim in the place which he shall choose. How many times? 3 times a year. Unleavened bread, Feast of Weeks or Shavuot, and Sukkot or Tabernacles. Those 3 times. he names it here, in the feast of unleavened bread and the feast of weeks, which we're coming up on, and in the feast of tabernacles. And they shall not appear. Now notice now, who are you appearing to? Most High. You ain't appearing before Levites. He didn't say, and they shall not appear before the Levites. He didn't say that. We're going before him. He says, you ain't coming before me empty, because, and every man shall give as he is able, according to what? Roll it up back there. Every man shall give as he is able, according to the what? Blessing of Yahuwah Elohim, which he what? Because some folks will be stingy. I ain't giving nothing. Okay, all right. Don't think that the Most High Yah is going to forget that. Don't think he's going to forget that. He says it's a free will offering. What you're able. He didn't tell you how much to give. He says give it. Just don't come up to Shavuot empty. Don't come up to Shavuot, don't give an offering. Oh, I ain't going there. We got other ways you can give offering. You can give offerings. We got all kind of and I hope y'all know we're getting ready to go to the digital currency. Central bank digital currency, which is supposed to be backed by the gold of the United States of America. We'll see how that goes. Because they got a lot of fiat money out there. Y'all know what they're getting ready to do when they go through this reset. They're going to try to tighten up and get rid of all that debt that they have and all that fiat money. Because they only going to allow you to get so much. And when you spend that up, you're done, brother. If they're dropping money electronically into your fund, into your account, when you spend that and you spend that up, you're done. They control it. Ain't going to be no, folks are going to try to rob. They're going to try to rob it electronically. There's some hackers out there now. They're going to learn something now. They're going to learn it. I'm sure the government's going to try to put some safeguards on there, but you got some people that are pretty smart. They're going to be able to tap into that. But when they go through this reset, other nations know it. And I was reading today, because I follow the metals, and I was reading today how the silver, they said there's only so much silver left now that they have determined that they can mine with all the mining, where they mine mints, where they mine silver. They said, oh, we're getting to, max silver. So there's other precious metal. There's only so much gold. There's more silver than there is gold. That's why gold is more expensive. It's a more valuable precious metal. But yeah, I was reading that in an article today on the silver. So there's going to be a rush on the silver market. Mark my words. There's going to be a rush on the silver market. And I already said everything's going to go off the rails after Passover 2023. So we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes. But I did tell y'all I'm not a prophet. Y'all remember me saying that. I said I'm not a prophet. Pesach 2023 marks 3.5 years from 2019, which I believe in the 400-year captivity and servitude that Yahusha has done. It was prophesied in Genesis 15 that there were going to be 400 years. Notice now that prophecy that he told Abraham, they were going to be in a land that they didn't know, which eliminates Egypt. Y'all know Abraham went into Egypt, right? Abraham, Isaac, they all went into Egypt. How do you know Abraham went into Egypt? He said, everywhere where you set your foot, I'm gonna give it to you. From the Nile, when you see where the Nile starts and where it empties out into Mediterranean, because we look from the Mediterranean down this way. Actually, you should look where the Nile starts and then where it empties out into. You have to almost turn Africa upside down, but it starts further down in Africa and then it empties out. It spills out into the Mediterranean. But wherever you see where the Nile starts and you start to piece together all these other rivers, what flowed out of what? There was 4 rivers that flowed out of what? There was 4 rivers that flowed out of the Garden of Eden. So where you have to go where the Nile starts, not up there where it empties into Mediterranean, but where it starts. And then what was so special about one of those rivers in Genesis that flowed out of the garden? There was one of them, and it gives you a characteristic of that river. Huh? Yeah, but there was something else. It does say that, yeah, it went around Ethiopia, because the whole continent of Africa was called Ethiopia at one time. But there was something, it's in Genesis, the second chapter, huh? Yeah, but what was that? But no, what was so special about that river where it said it flowed out? It says where there's what? Much gold. Much gold. So it tells you where that river starts and it flowed out of Eden, there's much gold there. So then you start to trace that down. I mean, that gives you clues. It gives you clues in the Bible that'll let you know about where the Garden of Eden is. And it's over in Africa. But you have to see where those 4 rivers start because they flowed out of the garden. It's not, because some people say, well, the garden was so big because once you see the Nile and the Euphrates, no. You have to go to where it starts because they flowed out. There was 4, yeah. 4 heads, and they flowed out to 4 different areas. So where there's much gold. So there's going to be a reset economically. And that's on the horizon. It's coming. It's coming. Have you guys heard of the BRIC nations? The BRICS nations? The BRIC nations start, B is for Brazil, R is Russia, I is India, C is China, S is South Africa. But those 5 countries, now there's other countries that have come into the BRICS. But they've already said they're going to come up with their own currency to challenge the dollar on the world market. And you've got other nations coming into the BRICS wanting to be a part of the BRICS. There was a nation out of Europe, and I forget which one it is, but one of those nations that's a part of NATO says, can we get into the BRICS? Because those BRIC nations aren't in NATO. NATO have their alliances and everything, but the BRICS are not in NATO. So they're going to come up, they're going to challenge the dollar. All of this stuff is happening. It's going to happen. You can't stop it. You can't stop it. It's going to happen. So every man is supposed to appear before him. Now, this feast of Shavuot that we're coming up to, we kind of went over it, Exodus 20 and verse number, let's start at verse number 2, Exodus 20 and verse number 2. This is what came out on the first Shavuot when he poured out, Torah. He poured out the commandments. So I am Yehuda Elohim, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. What is the first and great commandment? Right. Let's go to Deuteronomy 6 and 4. Actually, it's verse number 5 and 6, but let's go to Deuteronomy 6 and 4. Hear, O Yasharal, and this is what we sing, Shemai Israel. Yahuwah, Elohim, Echad, which is one. So hear, O Israel, Yahuwah Elohim is one Yahuwah, just one. And thou shalt love Yahuwah thy Elohim with all thy heart and with all thy soul and with all thy might. And these words which I command thee these days shall be where? In thine heart. And thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, and shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. This is teachable in your house, to know that he is one. And that's where Paul gets Ephesians 4 and 5. We quote Ephesians 4 and 5. He gets it from here. Hear, O Yasharah, Yahuwah Elohim is one. He's one Yahuwah. Now, in order to love him with all your heart, all your soul, and all your might, how do I show this love unto him? Obey him. Obey him. If I love him with all my heart, my soul, and my might, that love is obedience unto him. Obedience unto him. This, I think it says that in, we were in Deuteronomy 16, but I think it says it in Deuteronomy 16 that he shows his mercy unto thousands, and from generation to generation unto those who keep his commandments. I think somebody find it. I want to show you that in Psalms 103 and verse. Let's look at verse 14. Psalms 103 and 14. Oh, here. Y'all see, this is a good psalm to read. It's a good psalm to read. Verse 17, though. But the mercy of Yahuwah is from what? Everlasting to everlasting upon them that, and his righteousness unto his children's children. To such as. So this is from what? So when did it end? Because that's what they tell us. That's ended. That's over. They've convinced us that this is over. They've convinced us that something from everlasting to everlasting that ended. And they've fooled a lot of people. They've convinced the children of Yasharah that it's ended. It's over. That's over. All he teaches Old Testament Torah. That's over. No, you've been convinced by that. And the way, I said earlier that Yahusha, who they call Jesus, was a Hebrew. It's in Hebrews, the 7th chapter, I think it's the 14th verse, we don't have to go there, but I think it's the 14th. He says, it is evident that Yahusha sprung out of what? Tribe of Judah. So, if he's from the tribe of Judah, Judah was a son of Jacob or Israel, because he changed his name from Jacob to Israel. He had 12 sons. One of those sons' name was Judah. It is evident, when you look at his genealogy, it's evident that he sprung up out of Judah. So he was an Israelite. You can be a Hebrew and not an Israelite, but if you're an Israelite, you are a Hebrew. Because Abraham was a Hebrew, but he wasn't an Israelite because Jacob hadn't come on the scene yet. And Abraham had a lot of sons. He was a father of Meridian. What's his name? Meridian or Midian? Midian. That was one of his sons' name from Keturah. Midian. He had one child from Sarah, but when he married, or when Sarah died, he had Keturah. He married Keturah. He had a lot of sons by Keturah. And then it said he had sons and daughters by his concubines. So that's why we used to sing the song, Father Abraham, many sons had Father Abraham. Because we don't know how many children he had, but he did have a lot of children. But out of all his children, the only ones that came from that promised seed was Jacob, because he had Isaac. Isaac was his promised seed. So you had Ishmaelites that were Hebrew, but they were not Israelites. So you had Jacob, and then his name was changed to Israel. Jacob's sons were Israelites. So everybody that came from the descendant of Jacob were Israelites and Hebrews. Hebrew Israelite. Our Messiah was a Hebrew Israelite. And that has a very bad taste in a lot of people's mouths today. Don't talk about those Hebrew Israelites. I don't have nothing. What are you? I'm a Hebrew Israelite. Get out of my house. Don't you talk about those Hebrew Israelites. And Yahusha was one.
But the ones that's in your face, I mean, they're like very Afro-centric, they cuss folks out on the street, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
But that's what you see when you think of Hebrew.
Israelites, Hebrew Israelites, that's what you see. Right.
You don't see clean mouth, modesty, you don't see that.
Yeah, but we should portray it.
Right.
We should. We should portray it because everybody's not like. Now, you do know Jacob has some pretty rough boys. Levi. We call him Levi, but his name's, there's no V. It's Louis, but we call him Levi. But there's no V. If you see that V, it's actually a U. It's Louis. But Simeon and Louis, even Jacob said, "You've embarrassed me. You made my name stink amongst all these nations." And then brother says, should they treat our sister like a whore?
I sided with them. I'm like, but that's woven into the fabric of their culture.
It is.
You don't defile her, because if you do, then you got a consequence coming.
Yeah.
So I don't know why he was so sheepish about it.
I know. I was surprised because everybody feared them.
Right.
Jacob and his boys. It's like, man, you don't want to mess with them. But he said, you made my name stink amongst all these people. But really, they was like, man, especially after what they did to Shechem. But that's our ancestors. I do want to say this, that everybody that came over in the transatlantic slave trade were not Israelites. You had Israelites that was mainly in that transatlantic slave trade. Majority of them were Israelite. And you could see the names because they had the manifest with all those names. Majority of them were Israelites, but not all. There is a man in Atlanta, Georgia, that just recently he did his DNA, and him and his brother and family, and they go all the way back to the pharaohs of Egypt. They can trace their DNA, everything back to the pharaohs of Egypt. Now, when you look at him, you think he's an American Negro, probably a descendant of the slave trade, which he could be, but he's not an Israelite. So just because you look, doesn't mean you're an Israelite. And the Most High Yah is awakening Israelites. So you have a lot of people that aren't awakened, and I'm wondering, because we're getting close to the end here, maybe they're not Israelites because he's awakening the Israelites. He's not, so, and I seen that, I just seen that today. So it's like, he can trace, he's a Hamite. He's a Hamite. came out of Egypt. Yeah, a mixed multitude came out of Egypt. That's what it says. And in the 24th chapter of Leviticus, in the 24th chapter, it says an Israelitish woman, son, whose father was an Egyptian. And this was in the wilderness. So he came out with Israel when they came out of Egypt. But he was an Egyptian. He wasn't an Israelite. And then in the wilderness, Musha married Ethiopian. She wasn't an Israelite. She was an Ethiopian. You know? So you had those people in the camp, in the wilderness. So when it says they came out of mixed multitude, there was different nations that were with them. And when he awakens Israel and you have the Exodus, when there's going to be people who are going to come out with Israel, they're not going to be Israelite blood, but they're going to come out with Israel. It says that in Zechariah 8:23. You know, you're going to have people from all kind of, let's look at that. Zechariah 8:23. We say Zechariah, but it's Zechariah. Zechariah. 8:23. I think that's the one. Yeah. Thus saith Yahuwah of hosts, in those days it shall come to pass that 10 men shall take hold out of all languages of the nations. Languages of the nations, even shall take hold of the skirt of him that is a Yehudi, saying, now y'all know there was no J and no W in ancient Hebrew. It was, you know, there was no J or no W. So this is a Yehudi. That is a Yehudi saying, we will go with you, for we have heard that Elohim is what? They're gonna grab a hold of an Israelite. Them Israelites leaving? I'm going with them. I'm going with them Israelites. Why? Because Elohim is with them. Elohim made a covenant with those people. He made a covenant with that nation. And it says in prophecy that he's going to gather his people from all nations, from the four corners in all nations. Yahusha says that in Luke 21:24. He says you're going to be scattered into all nations. And you're going to remain in all nations until when? Until the time of the Gentiles is fulfilled. So when the Gentile day is over, that's when I'm going to gather all my people and I'm going to bring them back. So you're going to have people from other nations saying, oh, it's time for y'all to go? Oh, I'm going with you. I know Elohim's with you. I'm going with you. Now, Shaul talks about that second Exodus. He talks about it, and people say that's the rapture when he talks about the second Exodus. Because he said that he's going to gather his people. He says those who remain, those who are alive, they made it through that tribulation period. Even it says in Revelation chapter 20 that the first resurrection are those who had their heads cut off in the tribulation. They're a part of the first resurrection. So that lets you know the resurrection has not happened until after tribulation. And that's what Shaul says, you survived. And he's going to gather his people from the four corners, from one end of heaven to the other. He's going to gather his people. And Yahusha says that in Matthew 24, and I think it's verse 31, he says that. He's going to gather his people from one end of heaven to the other. Just like it says in Deuteronomy chapter 30. It all ties in to the same. You can't have a New Testament doctrine without Torah. Everything that you learn in the New Testament, you call the New Testament, has to be rooted in Torah. Otherwise, you've got a new doctrine. You've got something new. Because he even talks about the birth in the Old Testament. He talks about water baptism when they all went through the Red Sea. Shaul says when they all went through the Red Sea, they was all baptized. So if you wanted to make it out, of Egypt with them Israelites, you had to go through the water. That's the same now. You want to make it out? You want to get into the kingdom? You got to go through the water. You got to go through the water. And that's the birth of the water. That's why Yahusha said to Nicodemus, he says, aren't you a teacher of the law? You a doctor, and you don't know this? Shahusin, I mean, there is a new birth. You have to be born again. You should have known that. Just by studying Torah, you should know that. But he's waking up Israelites, and that's why some people say, I ain't no Israelite, I'm a Gentile. I'm not an Israelite. They might be true. That might be true.
I heard somebody say that one way you can tell is that the Spirit will bear witness with the truth and they teach it.
Yeah.
They'll cleave to it.
Right. When you start teaching this, if you got that spirit, you're gonna hook up with it. Right. Because I had somebody tell me, I'm a Gentile, I ain't no Israelite. And I used to think, no, brother, wake up, brother, you ain't no Gentile. But he might be a Gentile. After I seen that today, I'm going, man, you got folks over here, they're Hamites. Everybody's not an Israelite. But Yah knows who his people are. And that's why he's waking them up around the world. Not just here in the United States, but around the world, he's waking them up. Because we're getting close to the second Exodus, or what the church calls the rapture. We're getting close to that. We're getting close to that. That second Exodus. And he said, in Torah, it says that second Exodus is going to make that first one look like nothing. He said, folks ain't even going to be talking about that first one no more. They're going to be talking about this second Exodus. So let's go back to Psalms 103, verse, where was I at? Psalms 103, verse, what was that, 17, was it? Let's see, somewhere around there. Yeah, but the mercy of Yahuwah is from everlasting to everlasting, from them that fear him, and his righteousness unto children's children, to such as keep his covenant, and to those that remember his, to do what? To do them. Those are the ones that are getting this mercy from everlasting to everlasting. It doesn't end. It's not going to end. Some people says, no, that's over. You don't have to worry about it. You can study Torah, and you can pull that apart and show them in Torah. And some people say, well, I'm not under the Old Testament. We're under the New Testament. The New Testament is built on this. This is the foundation. What did Yahusha say about a foundation? If you're going to build a house, you better build it on a firm foundation. You better put it on a foundation that when the storms come and the wind blow, it ain't going to knock over that house, because it's built on a solid foundation. I think he said that in where we were just in Matthew 7. Did y'all see that? Matthew 7, 24. I think it's after 24, something like that. Let's look at 7:24. Let's see. But I thought it was, maybe it was after that. Yeah. Therefore, whosoever heareth these sayings of mine and doeth them, and he didn't lead nobody against Torah. If people are breaking the commandments, they're not following this Yahusha. They're following another Christ. And Yahusha told us there would be. He said there will be other Christs, plural, other Christs. He said that if it's possible, they're going to deceive the very elect. He said there'll be false Christs and false prophets that'll come unto you. And I thought he says if it's possible, they're going to deceive the very elect. So whosoever heareth these sayings of mine and doeth them, I will liken him unto a wise man which built his house upon a rock. And that's what the Torah is. It's a rock. So if I build my house upon this rock, and the rain descended and the floods came and the winds blew and beat upon that house, and it fell not, for it was founded upon a rock. Now, everyone that heareth these sayings of mine, which he taught Torah, and doeth them not, shall be likened unto a foolish man which built his house upon the sand. The rain descended, the floods came, the winds blew and beat upon that house, and it fell, and great was the fall of it. And the reason why it was so great, because when you get down to the end and you see all of this, but you have no time to change, that's a great fall. I don't have no time to repent. No, repentance is over with. It's time for that book to be open. It's time to be judged now. Now, what about all of us who, man, we're getting into some of this stuff and it sounds, even though it's not new, but it sure sounds new and everything. And you mean we're going to be judged on all of this and how we lived our life before that? Because he says that if you hear these commandments of mine and then turn from it, that's going to be worse for you. In fact, Kepha said, it's better that you never heard it than to hear of the holy commandments and then turn from them. So you have those who have not heard. So where do they fall under this on those who have not heard? Where do they fall? How's he going to judge them? How's he going to judge them? Anybody know? Y'all know how they're going to be judged? Huh? He's going to judge them by Torah. He's going to judge them by Torah. That's what he has. This is his ruling stick. This is his measuring stick. Torah is his measuring stick. He's not going to judge you on something that he hasn't written in his word. That would be unfair. I'm going to judge you on the commandments that I'm getting ready to come in the new kingdom. Oh, no, he's going to judge you on what he's already given you. That's what he's going to judge you on. He's going to judge you on that. So, back to Psalms 103, 17 and 18. It's easy to be deceived did y'all read this? It's easy to be deceived when you speak when you learn, I want to be able to say this with understanding, because those who know Torah and have been taught Torah, they know that this is an everlasting covenant and it's not going to be done away with. But when you can change the language and the culture, then it's easy to deceive people. When you can change the language and the culture, it's easy to deceive people. When you have Torah and they say that's the Old Testament, we're not under that anymore, we've got something new. We've got something new. We don't have to follow Torah. We don't have to keep his commandments. We're not under that covenant. We're under a new covenant. When they change the language and they change the culture,
it's easy to accept that because you're going to be given to change. You're going to be given to change. Now, this is something I'm speaking of that happened a long time ago. There is a culture that comes with this book. There is a culture that comes with this book. When you read it and you study it, there's a culture that comes with it. There's a language that comes with it. Now, we've been taught that it doesn't matter what the language is, you should still be able to get the message from the book, regardless of whatever language you're speaking. And there is some truth to that. You should be able to get the truth out of this in different languages. Now, why would I say you should be able to get the truth out of this in different languages? When you look at the miracle of Shavuot, what was the major miracle of Shavuot? All the different languages. What did they hear? When they said we hear them in our language, what did they hear? I mean, when they heard them speaking and it was a language, what did they say? We do hear them. Yeah, okay, we better go there. Acts chapter 2 and verse number 5, that where it starts, Acts 2 and 5. And when this was noised abroad, the multitude came and were confounded because that every man heard them speak in his own language. And they were all amazed and marveled, saying one to another, behold, are not all these Galileans? And now, how hear we every man in our own tongue wherein we were born? And it gives a list, but let's go down. Let's go down. Verse number 11. After it gives all of these nations, and they heard them in those languages, but what did they hear them speaking? They were speaking Hebrew, but in their language, what did they hear them say in their language? They could hear in their language that they were born in, they could hear the wonderful works of Elohim. That's what they heard, the wonderful works of Elohim. So in these different languages, these different nations and cultures, but what they heard was the wonderful works of Elohim. They heard it in these different languages. So different languages can bring you the wonderful works of Elohim, but it doesn't change the culture of these people. That's what I'm trying to get to. Just because it was the miracle and the phenomenon, like they said, we're amazed because these are just Galileans. These are not educated people. They're not multilingual, but we're hearing them in our native tongue, and what they're testifying is all of the wonderful works of Elohim. What has happened when they changed the language of the book, they took your culture from you. That's not what they did in this, when it happened here in the book of Acts and throughout the book of Acts. They still kept Torah. What has happened is, who knows what Hellenist is? Greek-speaking Hebrews. So what did they teach those Hebrews? They taught them Greek, and what else? They taught the Greek culture. They taught them the Greek culture. They taught them the Greek language and the Greek culture. So when you have a different language, you get a different culture. So what they did was they wanted to change the culture of these people. It was a big clash back in that day. And the ones who took the writings of that and they held it,
I would say we're still living in a Hellenistic period of history. I would say that. We're still living in a Hellenistic period of history because Israel doesn't speak Hebrew. They speak all these different languages, and they've taken on those cultures. He never intended for them to be as a Roman. Even though they were in Rome, because what is the saying? When in Rome, do as the Romans do. He never intended for his people to be like that. Even though you speak a different language, you still should keep your culture where you came from. He never wanted them to uproot their culture. But when you've been Hellenized, it's easy. If I change your language, I can change your culture. If I can change your culture, it's easy for me to give you somebody and say, that's your Messiah. Yes.
I was on a webinar today, which was talking about like cultural pop, and they were talking about Pacific Islanders and just that group, as well as Asians and things like that. And they were saying that one of the things they brought out is said when they came on, they spoke all of them, all on the panel spoke their native tongue. Like we have some Samoans and they from Hawaii, and they spoke it, and then they did it in English, and then they talked about the land, and they talked about because Hawaiians are always like the mother earth and everything. But anyway, they were like our culture was stripped from us. Our land was taken, like talking about the Polynesians and things like that. Our land was taken from us, and they took some of they tried to abort our culture. I mean, just to hear that we're rehearsing it, and they hold it, close to their heart. Their language is who they are.
Mm-hmm.
It's connected to their culture. It's connected to the way they see the world.
Right. Language is a part of your culture.
Right.
If you have a culture, you have a language.
Right.
And you can change the language and change the culture. And but really when you look at the people, it's the same people. What were these people? Phrygia, Pamphylia, Egypt, parts of Libya, Cyrene, strangers of Rome, Crete, Arabians. But what were they? They were Yasharal. They were Israelites. It's just that they were in these different lands. And they said, man, we can hear you talking about the wonderful works of Elohim. When you see this, you have to understand this is 33 AD, 33 Common Era, somewhere around there. When they're speaking the wonderful works of Elohim, how did they know they were speaking wonderful works of Elohim? What were they? The only thing they had to reference was what? Torah. That's all they had to reference. There was no Shaul. Shaul wasn't even here. Now you do know Shaul was a contemporary of Yahusha. Paul was a contemporary of Jesus Christ, of Yahusha Mashiach. Shaul was. How do you know that? Even though he was from Tarsus and he was born in a Roman province, he still would go to Jerusalem 3 times a year. He knew about Yahusha. He died about anywhere from 65 to 70 AD, because the historian says he died before the destruction of Jerusalem. Destruction of Jerusalem was 70 AD. He died before that. The only one that made it out of 70 AD, that survived 70 AD, it didn't go into captivity, was who? John. He was the only one. He was the only one that didn't go into captivity. Now, why are you saying all this? Because I'm doing some reading on the post-apostolic fathers. When you look at the Roman Catholic construct of Christianity, their foundation and their rock is what you hear when I say the post-apostolic fathers. They call them the apostolic fathers. That's where they go. That is the foundation that Christianity, modern Christianity, is built on. Is on that foundation. So when you go back and look at who some of these apostolic fathers were, and you do some reading up on them, that is the foundation of modern day Christianity. That changed and went away from Torah, the wonderful works of Elohim, and started their own religion. You know, as I'm looking at Justin Martyr now and reading some of his, and it's lengthy, his testimony, with Trypho, who was a Israelite, supposedly. I mean, I'm trying to see the the historic side of this. But when you look at what they're doing today, what we call Christianity today, it's built on these men. It's not built on Yahushua Mashiach. It's not. Because these men, even Shaul said, I want you to beware of false prophets, beware of false Christ, false preachers, false prophets. But he said one thing in particular: beware of philosophers. Remember, he says that? Beware of philosophers. And isn't that in there? Somebody find that. It's either in Colossians or Ephesians. Where's that at? I think maybe it's Colossians or Philippians. He says, beware of philosophers. Just look up the word philosophers. It's in there somewhere. It's either Philippians or Colossians. But he talks about that. Beware of philosophers, because those philosophers are going to spoil you. He said that in his writings. And when somebody find it, let me know. But all of these men, even Justice Martyr, is that on Mars Hill? Acts 17, because Acts 17 is Mars Hill. No, it's in one of his letters. It's in one of Shaul's letters. He talks about philosophers or philosophy of men. But, remember that? I can't recall exactly where it's at. But we got Bible thumpers here. Can look it up. Is that what it is? That's it. Yeah. That's the one. Colossians 2:8. Let's look at that. Colossians 2:8. Beware lest any man spoil you through philosophy and vain deceit. Shaul warned them, so you have Justin Martyr, who is a philosopher. He is a philosopher. Born about 100 CE or AD, died about 165 AD or C, somewhere around there. But he was a philosopher. Justin Martyr, who is an apostolic father, who when you go to seminaries, is that right, seminaries? And Bible colleges and stuff, you have to study Justin Martyr. A philosopher. He's a philosopher. Roman Catholic construct of Christianity is built on people like Justin Martyr, Ambrose, Jerome, Eusebius, Origen. A lot of these men are apostolic fathers. So when you see Constantine, it's easy for Constantine now to pivot to them because they had already spread their doctrine around Rome. And Shaul warned you, you better be careful of these philosophers. And that's exactly what you have that built the current day construct of Christianity. It was built by philosophers. It was not built by Shaul. It was not built by Yahusha. Because Yahusha does not go with their philosophers or their philosophy. Okay, our time's up, but I would still say that we're in a Hellenistic age, because they've stripped Yasharal. They've taken Shaul's words and everything, and they stripped Yasharal and made Yasharal follow another Christ. So that when you come with the true Christ, the true Messiah, and you come with Torah and teaching Torah, they think you got a new doctrine, brother. That's what they say. And when you look at those people in the first century and you look at them in the book of Acts, they kept Torah. They kept Torah. Even in the 15th chapter of Acts, when they said going to the Gentiles, just tell them to do what? There's 4 things they told them when you go, because every Shabbat day they've got Musha there and the prophets to teach them on the Shabbat. But right now, tell them 4 things. In the 15th chapter of Acts, there was 4 things that they pulled out of Torah. It was no new doctrine. They pulled it out of Torah, 4 things. And they say if those Gentiles do those 4 things, because every Shabbat they've got Musha and the prophets being taught every Shabbat. But right now, tell them to abstain from sexual immorality. That's one thing. Don't be doing no illegal sexual immorality. Get rid of that. Number 2 was eating meats with blood, which is in, we're not supposed to be eating meat with blood. Number 3 was food offered to idols. Don't be eating no food offered to idols, right? What was the 4th one? It had to do with blood, food offered to idols, fornication. There was one more in the 15th chapter of Acts. Was it strangled meat? Okay. Strangled meat, so it was the way that they were butchered, or the way they killed them. Now, where do they get that from? They got that from Torah.
So when you say don't eat meat with blood, I mean, so people shouldn't be, Yasharal shouldn't be eating rare steak.
Yeah, raw. They wouldn't even cook it. They would just get the meat, like animalistic, like they just grab the meat and just start eating it. Barbaric. Well, they had people who lived like that. They wouldn't even cook their meat. Not Yasharal now. Yasharal would cook their meat. But you had other nations, they even said barbarians. They would just eat meat, raw meat, like animals. Yeah. That's because Most High Yah loves it when you cook it. Because he taught you how to do those sacrifices on the altar and a meal offering, and you cooked it before them Levites ate it. And he said the aroma would go up. That's why we love good smelling food, because the Most High Yah does, because the aroma would go up to the heavens. He could smell it. They cooking some, they got their sacrifice. You had to prepare that sacrifice and you had to cook it. He said, I don't want y'all eating no raw meat. Tell them Gentiles don't eat no raw meat. Now, they've got Musha on the Shabbat day, and we'll teach them all that other, but, you don't eat no raw meat. You don't eat things offered to idols, nothing strangled, blood, and keep yourself from sexual immorality. In the 15th chapter of Acts, he says nothing about the Holy Shema, which we know that is Torah. You got to love the Most High Yah with all your heart, mind, soul, and him only do you serve. Hear, O Yasharal, Yahuwah, Elohim is one Yah. It doesn't say that. Yahusha said that's the first and great commandment, right? When he said that they asked him, he said the first and great commandment is the Holy Shema. The second one was what? Love thy neighbor as thyself. They say nothing like that in Acts 15. Acts 15 has nothing in there about love your neighbor as you love yourself. Not in Acts 15. It don't say nothing about lying. It don't say nothing about stealing. It don't say nothing about killing. It don't say nothing about honor father and mother. It don't say nothing about, but we know that we can't do those things. So they had to be taught those things. That's why in the 16th chapter of Acts, the Romans got mad at Shaul saying he's teaching us customs which is not lawful for us to keep because we're Romans. So they did teach Torah. They did teach that. That's all they had to teach. Nobody taught Shaul, not like you see today. You go into churches today, that's all you hear is Shaul. You don't hear Torah or Yahusha. You only hear Shaul. Shaul says this. Shaul says, how many of y'all, now I can go on about Shaul, y'all gonna get tired. But how many of y'all know that Shaul thought that the Messiah's return was going to be in his lifetime? He thought it was going to be in his lifetime. That's why he told him, if you're single, don't get married. If you're single, don't get married. The reason why he said that, because he thought it was going to happen in his day. And if it's going to be in that short period of time, y'all don't need to be thinking about getting married and all that. You know, if you're single, be like me, stay single. If you're divorced, don't get married. That's what he was telling them because he thought he was going to come in his day. Now, we can't say that today. And even if they would have did that in the first century, Israel would have, no, I was going to say Israel would have died out, but no, Israel ain't dying out, no. Israel had families. They ain't going to keep what Paul said. All right, any questions, comments? We're coming up on the counting the seventh Omer, which we got 6, and then 7, which is the 49th day, then the 50th day, the first day of the week, coming up on June 4th. So I thank you all for listening. We'll be back here on the Shabbat. Keep my family in prayer as we manage through this time in the loss of our dear brother. I don't know about the arrangements yet, so I can't answer any of those questions. But just keep us in prayer. Anything else? If not, then we're going to say shalom, shalom unto you. We'll be back on the Shabbat. We'll be back on the Shabbat. Thank you for joining us.